Thank you all for coming today. My name is Jeffrey Hammond. I'm part of the ISV segment here at AWS, which means that I serve companies that live and die by the success of their software. Been here for about 2 years, but I've been in the software development space for over 30. Started out as a developer, built software development tools, product management, product marketing roles for about 10 years, and then spent the last 15 years as an industry analyst at Forrester. The reason that I came to AWS was that I have a cool job. I get to spend most of my time talking with product decision makers, CPOs, VPs of product, and CTOs in our customers, and understanding what they are trying to do, how they're trying to grow their business, and figuring out how we can help do that at AWS. And so in a given year, I will have probably hundreds of those conversations. And some of the trends that we see emerging from those conversations are things that I'd like to talk to you about today, because there's a couple things, my opinions. First of all, the ISV segment is a hard, demanding segment. I think it's the hardest one of all the segments that we have at AWS. And the reason for that is very, very simple. You live and die on the success of your ability to create software that creates value for your customers that can drive value. And that's the second thing. You have customers that you have to work backward from and support, and that places some of those demands on us as we support you. But that said, the difficulty also creates the excitement. So let's move in today. So last 2 years, I feel like I've almost had 3 separate discussions based on what's happened in the market. When I first started having conversations with CPOs in early 2020, the Rule of 40 was all about growth. Growth matters. What's our gross margin? How are we going to move forward? And then when we got to Q3 of 2022, Q4, things started to change pretty rapidly. And I remember my first conversations with one of our CPO customers in the security space, first week in January. What's your top priority? Got to cut 15% of my COGS. Doesn't sound much like a CPO conversation, right? We're all about creating new products, adding new features, and yet we were having that conversation. And for the first half of 2023, that became a pretty dominant conversation. How do we make sure that we reduce our spending so that we can now focus on the part of the Rule of 40 that matters, which is net profit and free cash flow? Now, the good thing is April came around and the conversation started to change again. And it seemed like almost every conversation that we were having now was about what are we doing with Gen AI in terms of our new product development. So it's good. It's nice to have conversations about green shoots. But I would also say that there are some other interesting shifts that I've seen in the conversation. ISV, although it's probably one of the most difficult segments, it's also one of the segments, it is the segment that is the most optimized already of any of our customer base. And so what we've started to see as the optimization work has been done, it starts to set us up for conversations about innovation again and about growth. So it feels like we're starting to come out of some of the tough times that we went through. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of good talent in the process. I think Q3 layoffs through 2023 in the tech industry were somewhere around 245,000. So one of my questions is, okay, now that we have the ability to innovate again, who's going to do that work? All right? And how are we going to move forward? So how do you think about creating innovative products that drive profit given this kind of whipsaw type change? Well, when I work with our ISV customers, I kind of start with this very simple formula. If you don't recognize it, it's Newton's second law, but there's a software equivalent of Newton's second law that I would ask you to think about as you're looking at your portfolio and thinking about profitable growth. First, think of F as the total amount of market force that you can generate around your product and where that force is providing value. Now, how do you generate that force? You generate that through a combination of mass, the resources that you have at your disposal, the developers, the product owners, the folks doing documentation, the go-to-market folks, the product marketing folks, and then how fast the efforts of those resources can be applied. Now, there's a a challenge with that M part. One of the things that I see is that a lot of organizations, there's an awful lot of that M that is being applied to what I would call non-differentiating technology, non-differentiating features. As an example, does it really differentiate your product anymore if you're maintaining a database on an EC2 instance or, God forbid, something even bare metal? Should we really be focused on managed database services at this point? If you are a traditional ISV, and I would say that still well over half of the ISVs out there are selling on-prem software. That's what IDC tells us. How are you taking those investments and moving them forward? So when you think about how you want to put your strategy together, ask that question first. What is the mass that we have of resources, and how much of that are they spending on above-the-line differentiation, innovation capabilities? And then, are we making the right investments from an acceleration perspective, from a DevOps perspective, from an automation perspective, that we are able to rapidly apply that? If you do that, then the force that you are putting toward differentiation and innovation then drives profit increases. So a very simple sort of way to think about the strategy that you're putting together. All right, let's dive into some specifics. So when I have conversations with our product decision makers or with our CTOs, one of the things that we like to do is focus on 4 different areas of their strategy. And the first one, from a CPO perspective, is always around innovation. What are the priorities that you are looking to drive to create differentiation in the market? Because differentiation is the path to value, and value is the path to profit. So some of the most common tactics that we see that are driving their strategy, not a lot of surprise here. Thinking big with new products. We still see net new product development, improving customer experience, differentiating with the data that is in the product, investing in flexible process automation, and then finally putting AI ML to work. We see these things crop up again and again. Let's dive into a little bit more detail. Thinking big to increase market differentiation. It's really fun to talk to folks about some of the ideas that they have and what the cloud enables them to do. Some of the recent conversations that I've had, globally managed security operations. So ISV that we're working with in the security space, turns out as they want to go up market, as they want to do bigger deals with global customers, those customers work across multiple regions. They want their SOC to be able to operate across multiple regions. So they need to be able to present a global view of the security threats that are out there. In this case, we had a 30,000-foot view. How do we move forward with that? And talk a little bit about how we use some of our digital innovation capabilities to meet their needs. Slightly different one, the digital intersection of the future. You might believe it after this week, but the average traffic light intersection is only reprogrammed once every 5 years. Sure feels like it here with the Grand Prix. But what if you could use AI technology to do video analysis of the traffic, and you could set that up to the sensors that are in the traffic cabinet and reprogram the intersections on demand? That's something that one of our customers is doing. And to get there, they've had to acquire multiple technology companies, and they've needed to partner with public sector companies to make that happen. It's been a great conversation as we've worked with that ISV to help connect them to their customers. And that's one of the ways that we like to help. So new product development still going on, still important. Innovative customer experience. So it may not seem like doing and investing in customer experience would be necessarily innovative and produce that much value, but I'd ask you to pause and think about that for a second. Improving day-to-day customer usage is important because quantity has a quality all of its own, and when you invest in those affordances day after day and you improve them and you make them easier to use, they grow up and they accrete. And probably my best example of that is GitHub. Think about it. It's built on top of an open source software configuration management tool. So how do you create value on top of something that's already open source? When you build the customer experience, when you make it easy to use, easy to choose, easy to deliver, easy to operate, you build differentiation. And in the case of GitHub, it turned out to be about $7 billion worth of differentiation. So whether it's GitHub or it's any other product in the market, making it easy to use is critical. And it's not just the day-to-day user experience. I wish I had $1 for every time I have a conversation with a CPO and I ask them how long it takes on average to onboard their products. And I hear things like, oh, it takes a couple months because that means you need a direct sales force or you need some sort of services organization. And so the customer experience that is part of that time to value is every bit as restrictive as a bad day-to-day customer user experience. There's also user experience from the administrator or the stakeholder, the business buyer perspective, and investing there, for example, to extract data and provide insight on top of it is a valid strategy as well. Differentiating products with AI and ML. Bunch of different examples here. And I heard that Werner today talked about the fact that, Gen AI is out there, but there's actually a lot of AI ML capabilities already out there. Traditional AI ML, maybe I would call it. And we've seen organizations create a ton of value in that space. One of my favorite examples is a company that is in the HR IT space that uses the idea of nudges during the hiring process to get the folks that are involved in it to think about whether the decisions that they are making are based on fact, if they incorporate principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, whether they're doing the right thing. We're seeing a lot of customers working with entity extraction using services like Comprehend so that they can essentially create taxonomies of metadata for domain-specific applications in the industries that they work in. Financial services is a great example of that. Now, with respect to Gen AI, when we have these conversations, and as I said, we're having them almost daily since April, I ask a number of different things. If you're thinking about how to move your Gen AI strategy forward, first question, where do you process content and data? Because that's where you're going to want to look to apply Gen AI technologies. What useful patterns or entities or events can you detect and extract? Was working with a particular customer that builds hardware for video cameras. And one of the things they saw as they were trying to improve their differentiation and their innovation and transform from a hardware-based business model to an over-the-top software services-based business model was that their ability to detect patterns created the ability to create new vertical entry points into additional markets. So we all know patterns like the Amazon driver just delivered a package, or that there's somebody that's in my driveway and I need to put a security alert in place. But what happens if you connect the pattern of audio around a fall with the video of detecting a fall? Now you've got fall detection, which is a potential healthcare-based use case for elderly workers, and that creates potentially something that is a lot more valuable given the particular cohort of customers that they're interested in. You can apply that same sort of thinking. What are the patterns that derive value, and then how do we put AI services into being able to detect and act on those patterns? Also, I think one of the things that a lot of the folks that are looking at Gen AI strategies miss is the data part of that. If your data is not already cleaned, if it has not been optimized, if it is not easily available, and it can be quickly accessed, you're going to have a real problem executing that Gen AI strategy. So as much as anything, you've got a data strategy that you've got to get in place before you think about applying the technology. Now, I'll say one more thing about this, and some of the most exciting ways that I'm seeing our customers apply AI. It's going back to that customer experience point. If you think about the way that our customers have interacted with systems over the past 40 years, we have always demanded that our users conform to the context of the system. Have you filled out the form with the right required fields? Have you tabbed to the right field back when we had DOS-based applications? And what a generative approach allows us to do is potentially have the system conform to the context of the user. change the way that that user experience happens. To me, that feels like potentially the biggest change from going from DOS-based applications to Windows applications, or from Windows applications to iOS applications. That shift in customer experience creates disruption. Disruption creates opportunity. If you can seize that opportunity, then you can generate value through your ability to innovate if you've invested in the A part of that F equals MA application. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Okay, so how do we help our customers when they're executing these particular tactics or any other innovation tactic to create new products? There's a number of things that we do. I'm going to start with one example, something called our Venture Innovation Program. It's part of a group of offerings here at Amazon called our Digital Innovation Family. Venture Innovation sticks ISVs or startups that have built innovative technologies together with enterprises that potentially need those technologies. In this example, Slice Insurance is a company that has built a cloud-based ability to create custom insurance quotes very, very quickly and white label them. And by connecting them to an enterprise insurance company that was looking to do exactly that, we created a win-win for both customers, and they saw a lot of value in that. So if you've got a particular solution in an industry or that serves a particular niche, the Venture Innovation Program is one way for us to help you connect to the customers that we have that are already on AWS. But it's not the only way that we help customers. Another example is a working backwards engagement. The security vendor that I mentioned earlier in my speech, that 30,000-foot vision of a global SOC, well, how do you work backwards from that? Let's write a PR FAQ for that. Let's ask the 5 whys. We take the process that we use inside AWS. It's part of a multi-week engagement where we work backward from that, and in some cases go all the way into robust prototyping. So it's a way to start to look at the A part of that F equals MA and say, can we use the same techniques that we use to deliver new capabilities and services as fast as possible and apply it to your particular problem? It's funny because we don't necessarily talk about having a methodology, a development methodology at AWS, but we really do. And working backwards captures that about as well as anything. So if you're not aware of it, it's a great program to have if you're trying to look at if you're thinking big. Connected to that is something called a PACE lab. PACE stands for Prototyping and Cloud Engineering. In a PACE lab, we attach a team that has design resources as well as development and implementation resources to that idea, and we take a number of weeks and build that robust prototype with our capabilities. Sometimes you can work with partners to do that as well, but it's all a way to accelerate the innovation of a new product idea that you might have. There are also simpler ways in which we help drive that innovation. If you've never run an immersion day or a workshop around a particular technology, I would encourage you to do that. I think of one of our customers that I worked with recently where the SA that was involved with the customer did a 2-day workshop around Bedrock and got their first POC up to basically be able to do Q&A around their product documentation. So first proof point, quickly delivered, was able to give the business stakeholders something to see to understand how the technology could be applied. And that sort of thing happens all the time. I'm seeing a lot of it going on right now in Australia. That team has put together a really great workshop to enable their customers. In addition to that, if you want to go bigger and you've got a bigger idea that happens to be AI related, take a look at the Generative AI Innovation Center, and your account manager can help connect you to that. They're looking for big ideas to work with our ISV customers together to deliver. There's one more thing that we do in this space to help. It's a program that I help co-run. It's called the Roadmap Acceleration Program. It is a very lightweight, very quick session that we work with your product owners, your product decision makers, understand their priorities, and then come back with a specific set of recommendations for next steps that we can take around those important priorities. And that's something that, if you're interested, you can also talk to your account rep about. Okay, let's move on. Innovation is great, but selling more of what you currently have is also really important if you're a product owner. Top line growth. And in that space, some of the most common tactics that I am seeing organizations look to execute: geographic expansion. I'd say maybe 65% of our conversations include that as a component. We see customers in Europe that want to do a better job coming to the US. We see customers in the US that are really interested in going to Australia and New Zealand. We see customers from around the world that are interested in moving into China. And it turns out that doing that is really kind of hard. There are different rules and regulations for every country that you have to go into. You've got to think about the staff that you put in place, the operating model that you create, and it's not easy. And there are things that we can do to help with that. In addition to geographic expansion, you've got expansion of the portfolio itself. It's great to build your own innovation and to ship it, but if you can buy it and get a good price for it, that's also a pretty good strategy as well. It's interesting, in Q1 of this year, we saw that overall M&A activity by value was down by about 20%, but interestingly enough, the number of deals was not. The number of deals was actually higher than Q4 and Q3 of last year, and it was higher than the overall average over the last 10 years. So what that tells me is M&A is still happening. It's not as much the big splashy deals, it's the technology acquisitions that allow organizations to build complementary product strategies and build themselves from a single product into a portfolio. As part of that, one of the most common tactics that we see is the move to a platform play. To give you some examples, over the last year, Tenable platform, the Khoros platform, the CyberArk platform. This is a tactic that goes back as long as I've been in the industry. 25 years ago, when we bought up development tools and created the Rational Suite, we were essentially executing a platform play. It's one of the best ways to go up in the enterprise, to be able to sell to a higher level, to get a higher ASP, and to make it profitable for that very expensive sales force to be able to drive net revenue instead of just focusing on growth. Now, that creates its own challenges because, as you know, when you start buying companies, you've now got multiple cultures that you've got to amalgamate. You've got multiple technologies that you have to amalgamate. So think about going back to that, using customer experience as a differentiator. If you're buying adjacent products, what impact does that have on your ability to be successful with a superior customer experience? Does that mean that you have to rewrite all the UIs because you're going to do UI-based integration? Does that mean that you have to do a data migration because you want to make sure that all the data can be accessed so that you can create reporting capabilities or extract insights across those various pieces of data for a stakeholder, for an executive that you're now selling a more expensive product to? Those sorts of decisions are things that we can also help with as well. Adjacent market entries, it's very common that we are seeing organizations that want to sell higher in an organization or potentially want to sell into SMB. And so in that case, well, we have enterprise segments, we have SMB segments, and we have teams that sell in that area, and there are co-marketing opportunities that we can help with as well. Transitioning to product-led growth is a hot topic, but that gets back to customer experience because if you don't have a product that is easy to sell, it's really hard to implement product-led growth. If you don't have a data strategy that's in place that allows you to get good telemetry from the products that you've created, it's really, really hard to implement product-led growth as well. And then the final thing that we're seeing a lot of organizations focusing on right now is just making sure that they close out the leaky bucket. One of the best ways to improve your profit is to drive up your net dollar retention. And sometimes that means focusing on features that your existing customers want as opposed to new features that would have driven growth under the Rule of 40 model. Okay, let's talk about how we can help with some of these. First example here is that geographic expansion example. If you're from APJ or you're in design, you might know Canva. Canva comes out of Australia, and they were very, very interested in being able to go into China. And so there's a specific program that we have called go to China, which helps set up a local entity, which helps guide with the strategy, which then helps guide the execution of that strategy to put it into operation. And as a result, we were able to help them take their existing products and very, very quickly move them into a new market. In addition to Go to China, there's a new program that we have introduced. It was in pilot this year, and we're expanding it next year. It's called Passport. Passport is specifically designed to help with geographic expansion for ISVs, and it is not limited to a single region. So if you happen to be in Europe and you're interested in expanding to the US, Passport can help with that. If you're in the US and you're thinking of expanding to Europe or to Asia, Passport can help with that. One of my teammates, Lexi Nauer, runs that program. And so you can talk to your AM if geographic expansion is something that is on your agenda. In addition to geographic expansion, there's also channel expansion. And in this area, we see a lot of our customers investing very successfully in things like Marketplace as a way to drive accelerated co-sell and shorten the cycle for product acquisition. Lacework's a really good example here. Of course, you know them, their data-driven security platform. And when they implemented their Marketplace support in 2020, what they saw was a 56% increase in deal size, a reduction in the time of the sales cycle, and they increased referrals by over 54%. So pretty good story there. There's work that has to be done to optimize for the channel. But in addition to Marketplace, there are other programs that build on top of it, like ISV Accelerate, that begin to tap co-sell with the AWS sales force as well. And we see that that's something that can really turbocharge additional revenue expansion inside the AWS customer base if it is something that you want to pursue. In addition to Marketplace expansion, you've got cross-sell, upsell, and also M&A. I mentioned the importance of M&A. There's actually a program that we have. It's called the M&A Hub. If you do a search for that, AWS M&A Hub on Google, you'll find it. It's a public site. But there are a whole range of services that we offer when you think you might be buying a company, even before the purchase happens, that we can help assess the potential integration challenges that you're going to have. There are also services that are part of that that can help accelerate the integration process after the acquisition has happened. A lot of folks don't know that we have these programs, but they can certainly help make sure that you get the value, the accretive market growth from those acquisitions if you make them. Okay, let's move on to the A part of that F equals MA equation. Some of the things that we see organizations doing to improve their ability to deliver their mass. Strengthening their development culture, their processes, and org. You would think that we would have this figured out by now, but it's rare that I run into an organization that is happy with how effectively they are delivering their software product, and there's just a whole set of discussions that we have there. One in particular pops up a lot, which is improving your ability to run experiments very quickly. And that can be the tactical process of multivariate testing and the ability to do that, both in the interface and at the service level, as well as the ability to very quickly take design decisions, get customer feedback on them, and be able to incorporate that feedback. Think about it. If you've got less innovation capacity today than you did a year ago because you did layoffs, you've got to make sure that the capacity that you have can be put to value more quickly. And experimentation is a way to very quickly determine the question marks that you might have and see whether or not they're going to be stars or cash cows or dogs and get rid of them. So that's something that has a lot of focus in our conversations. Obviously, automation is really important. DevOps automation, platforms as part of that. Shifting security assessments higher up in the development process so that you don't have to wait weeks or worse at the end of the delivery process. And then for our larger ISV customers, decisions around how to build resilience into their infrastructure is something that it becomes increasingly important, especially when we have conversations about, do you need to be multi-AZ or do you need to be multi-region? Even though we have an opinion on it, this is an area where sometimes your customers have to demand something that has some pretty serious consequences from an architectural perspective if multi-region is on the agenda. Now, I want to focus a little bit and drill in on this organization piece. And the reason that I think that we have these conversations and we look forward to having these conversations is because of the realities of what organization enables when it comes to innovating and doing it at speed. Conway's Law is one of my favorite things because you see how the organizations often prevent acceleration and prevent this ability to release new products. There's a great cartoon out there that I don't have in this particular presentation, but I think one of the reasons that there are 17 different ways to launch a container at AWS is because of the hierarchical structure of the way that we build our service teams. It's a reflection of the reality of Conway's Law. Now, one of the things that we're seeing larger, and I would say more mature ISVs that have portfolios of products innovating to be able to support that is by making investments in platform teams. And this is always kind of a dangerous place because a platform team doesn't necessarily have a profit target that is associated with it, so you can potentially create some dysfunction there. But on the other hand, the technical requirements of operating at scale across multiple regions and the level of expertise required to do that effectively almost demand that you have those skills centralized in an organization that all product teams can take advantage of. What we tend to see in that space is that most ISVs that think that they need to have something to support a portfolio of products are at one of three stages of maturity. In that first stage, they focus on the ability to be able to introduce and release products more effectively. So some of the first services that you will see centralized, data access, DevOps pipeline delivery, the ability to do common security reviews and have common security standards, design systems that allow you to drive that day-to-day customer experience innovation that we talked about earlier in the presentation. Once you get those basic capabilities in place, though, you start to see a little bit of an evolution in what a platform can offer to a large ISV organization. The ability to begin to do significant levels of automation to reduce the operational costs of running a portfolio of products via stacks or infrastructure as code. The ability to start to pull innovations that the individual product teams make back in to the platform so that all the teams can take advantage of them. So a refactoring process. The ability for those product teams to be able to do almost everything that they need via self-service so they don't feel constrained by the platform. That becomes a really big issue. The ability to start to offer second-order analytics in terms of how the products themselves are performing. So think about it. If you want to embrace more product-led growth type approaches, you need the data to be able to make those sorts of decisions. Do you want to integrate or implement that data multiple times across a portfolio, or do you want to try to implement it once and provide common capabilities and allow the product teams to be able to look at that data and compare apples to apples instead of looking at different things from different products? And then the final phase is interesting. What we tend to see kick in as organizations get very, very large and they start to have to operate at scale and they have thousands or tens of thousands of customers is that there's a certain amount of resilience engineering that needs to be done to harden the platform and being able to harden their products, and being able to do that at the platform level can provide very effective leverage for the types of skills that you need to be able to work at scale. Now, across all three of those stages, there are different things that an organization needs to think about in terms of what's important. Initially, having leadership committed to the idea of a common platform becomes important. Cloud skills and fluency are important throughout that entire platform maturation process. As you start to do more and more on the platform, being able to have the platform reflect the needs of the products that are dependent on it, that joint roadmap and the ability to do refactoring become much more important. As you get more mature, making sure that you have empowered the product teams to be able to do what they need to do becomes critical so that they don't walk away from the platform. So committing to that empowered model of customer self-service becomes extremely important. And then at the best organizations, you see that the platform team themselves adopt a product mindset. The product teams are their customers, and they look to serve their customers and work backward from those customers the same way that the product teams are as well. Metrics, of course, are important throughout as well. So an example of how we help customers as they work through this process. QSR Software started with us in 2015, and they used the working backwards process for a new product that they put together, but during that process, they used the Amazon methodology, if you will, the working backward methodology, the PR-FAC process to change their delivery culture. And what they saw when they went to market, they were able to redefine their product in only 3 months with a very small team of developers, 2 developers. They were able to onboard their first 100 locations within 1 week. So think about that onboarding customer experience. They were able to onboard over 1,000 locations for the new product within 6 months. They were able to start to add new features very, very quickly. So an ongoing cadence of innovation that was very different for them. They decreased the time it took to configure their applications to 3 minutes, not bad for an onboarding customer experience. They automated their CI/CD pipeline so that the developers could focus more time on their high-value tasks. That's taking that M part and saying we're taking the non-value-added piece out so that they can spend more time with the value-added piece of M. And the net result, which is what is really important, increased customer satisfaction because of increased value, which then leads to profit. Okay, last area to think about. What sort of investments do we see organizations making to improve their operational excellence? Cost optimization and technology optimization are probably the biggest ones that we have here. The reason that we differentiate those is because cost optimization is something that doesn't necessarily take a lot of effort in terms of the technologists to get a value from. So an example of that would be making sure that you're implementing savings plans correctly, or that you're maybe moving from reserved instances to savings plans. Technology optimization starts to span a spectrum. It could be relatively simple, like making sure that you can take advantage of Graviton and get cost reductions by doing a recompile, or it can be pretty substantial and expensive, like making sure that you can implement auto-scaling and moving from EC2 instances to containers, and then implementing auto-scaling on top of that. That said, I think of a conversation I had in the summer with a Canadian customer of ours that implemented EKS and auto-scaling on top of that. And the CPO's comment to me was, we've saved so much that we're now worried that we're not going to hit our EDP commit. Talk about a high-quality problem there. So now what happens is we can start thinking about and having those product innovation discussions. So even though it's challenging, it's worth doing that effort. And we are here to help you. I had a conversation earlier today where the CEO that I was talking to came in and apologized because of a migration that they were doing to DynamoDB that was going to save them a significant amount of money. And the comment was, that's great. So now let's talk about what we're going to do with that, how we're going to put it into product innovation. And that's why that FMA formula is so important, because if you can think about what those opportunities are to change the relative proportion of your M, you can start to have those innovation conversations that do drive profit again. So in addition to that, technology and cost optimization, we constantly have discussions about where can we use managed services better to be able to help shift that proportion of M. 2 other things that come up. As I mentioned, there's a lot of what I would call traditional ISVs out there, and migration of their existing products to SaaS products dominates those conversations. And then lately, even with our SaaS native, cloud native ISVs, we're having some very interesting conversations about hybrid SaaS or SaaS anywhere type architectures, which is an interesting one because it's another example of where customers are dictating what you have to do And that's creating an impact on what we need to do to support those that have to live in an environment where there's data plane, control plane separation. So how to think about optimization within the overall product strategy effort. I think it's important to ask a number of questions. So first of all, focus on that innovation piece first and constantly ask yourself, how are we differentiating? How are we driving innovation? Because that is the key to profitable growth. Second, what are the cloud services that we can leverage? If you like Simon Wardley, do Wardley mapping to understand where the table stakes are changing, where you cannot do database migration anymore, where you cannot try to build your own large language models, where you can not reinvent an eventing system so that you can focus on value that your customers get and grok. From a portfolio perspective, how are you going to take from your products that are cash cows to fund your question marks? And then from a technical debt perspective, how are you going to balance retirement of technical debt with investments in that AO part of the F equals MA application to increase the speed with which you're delivering? A couple examples here of how we've been working with customers to do that. One which is very, very simple and very tactical. Drive Wealth is a global fintech investment company. They do fractional equity trading, and they work with more than 100 partners around the world. They did nothing more than replace one of their existing databases that they supported with Aurora, and they saw some pretty significant improvements from that. Improved read-write throughput and dramatically decreased cost. So those sorts of tactical opportunities are all over the place. Some of the things that I see in addition to this, .NET modernization, as I mentioned, moving to Graviton, implementing effective auto-scaling to improve utilization. It kind of shocks me to see how many of those opportunities are still out there. Now, I mentioned SaaS, and I mentioned this idea of SaaS Anywhere. There was a really, really great session yesterday, so unfortunately I can't tell you to go to it now, but when you get the YouTube videos up there, if this is something that you think might be important, SaaS 308 is worth watching. We see customers investing in single control planes with multiple abilities to deploy those data planes, either in a multi-tenant or a single-tenant configuration, and flexibility is the watchword. In some cases, Mendix is a good example. They use that capability to deploy single tenancy as a premium feature for customers that think that's important. And in other cases, we find that our customers struggle with how to deal with potentially having multiple topologies here. But we can help with that. If you are not familiar with the SaaS Factory organization, it's worth getting to know them, not just because of the best practices that they write about or the reference architectures that they have like SaaS Boost, but we have seen them help multiple of our customers, especially traditional ISVs, as they decide what their long-term SaaS evolution strategy is going to be, go through SaaS migration, and then move on to modernizing their solutions into fully multi-tenant SaaS solutions or remote hybrid SaaS solutions. In addition to SaaS Factory, though, that's not all. There are other programs that we see organizations using to drive down the cost of doing this so that then we can get back to that increased profit part of the equation. One example of that is the Migration Assistance Program, specifically designed to help on-prem solutions, including ISV solutions that are deployed on-prem, migrate to the cloud and become SaaS-based solutions. The workload migration problem, or the workload migration program, is similar, except that it addresses all those customers that you might have had on-prem that you now want to move to the cloud on top of your brand new SaaS application that you have migrated. We help make it easier and incentivize those customers to move to the product that you have built. And there are things like data center divest, which is if you've been a cloud native ISV and you've invested in your own data center and you've built all that up, but now you want to move into the public cloud, we can help make it easier to to get rid of those assets in a way that helps fund that transformation. There are also simpler things. We talked about technical and cost optimization, things like the Always Be Optimizing program. The team has identified patterns that we commonly see that ISVs find that they can use as optimization opportunities. And so here in North America, your SAs can engage those folks to be able to identify those quick hits that let you free up the cogs to put back in to the product growth that you really want to focus on. Other things in that space, optimization and licensing assessments are really, really easy to do. We have some specific capabilities around AWS for Microsoft workloads when it comes to optimization. As you can imagine, Microsoft licensing optimization is a target-rich environment for traditional ISVs that happen to build Windows applications as part of their product portfolio. And then finally, there are technical field communities that can provide a lot of value here. The resilience technical field community, as well as the next generation developer experience technical field community. Okay, I've thrown a lot at you in the last 45 minutes. Knowing which of those 20 tactics are going to work for you is part of your job, especially if you're in a product management role. It's the combination of identifying which of those are the most appropriate to yield value that is going to help you turn tactics into strategy. One way that I recommend you do that is by using a lightweight portfolio-based mechanism. If you've ever done agile planning poker, think of this as a similar sort of concept at a portfolio level. What we do is we define the opportunities that are out there across these different types of tactics. We've got these new products that we want to invest in, or we know that we have this COGS reduction target, or we want to be able to expand our channels by working with these many partners. All of those opportunities compete with each other for your for your resources. So you need to think about scoring those opportunities to figure out which ones are the ones that make the most sense to invest in. When you score them, think about the overall size of the opportunity to drive revenue, because revenue is the basis of profit, and the level of strategic alignment with where you want to go in the longer term as a business. If it's going to generate a lot of revenue, if it's highly aligned with your strategy, it's a big bubble, and that's something that you should focus on. Next, look at the potential costs of executing that opportunity. Are there large migration costs? Do you have to go hire a new development team? Do you have to invest significantly in content production? And also look at the risk of those. What's the likelihood that we will be successful and actually generate the revenue that we think that we're going to generate? Have we done this before? Have we seen other companies do this before? At Amazon, one of the things that we like to talk about is a decision a one-way door or a two-way door decision. Great example of a one-way door decision. We want to introduce a new developer experience, and we want to have an API that's part of that so that developers can build things on top of our product. It's really hard to unmake that decision once you've launched an API. That's a one-way door. One-way door is a riskier thing because it's harder to pivot from that. Once you've got that, your strategic opportunity and alignment, the potential costs of the opportunity, the potential risks of the opportunity, it's pretty easy to plot them. And on a chart like this, what you tend to see is bubbles that are in the bottom lower left-hand quadrant tend to be your low-hanging fruit. And you want to make sure you have a lot of those, especially if they are related to cost reduction, shifting that ratio of M. Bubbles that are in the upper quadrant aren't necessarily bad. We like those, even if they're potentially more costly or more risky, but we want them to be bigger if we're going to actually commit to doing those things. And then the next question you can start to ask is, are there ways that we can shift the risk and the cost leftward and downward? Can we get some of these things into the low-hanging fruit quadrant? Can we get these things into, yeah, maybe it's a risky thing, but it's an innovation flyer because we can do it in a very inexpensive way. We can do a proof of concept, or we can even have a partner funded by Amazon take a look at this and see if it's worthwhile. If you can do that, then the number of opportunities that you have to execute to drive innovation starts to go way up. That's how we have conversations, and much like planning poker, it's not so much where the bubbles fall, it's the differences when you have different people in the organization put these things together and score them. Because what those differences start to do is create a conversation where we start looking at the assumptions that were made when we scored those opportunities and why those assumptions are different and the experiences that the different people bring to that. So you can do this yourself. We do this with our ISV customers, and that's basically what the wrap sessions that I mentioned are part of. So it allows us very, very quickly to get on the same page and then make sure that your SA, that your CSM, that your AM is focused on the same priorities, the top priorities that you've decided that are important and that we're helping to deliver them with whatever programs, any of the 20 odd ones I think that I mentioned. So that's it for today. I hope you understand a little bit better about how we can help you as an ISV. It's not just at the technology level, it's at the business level as well. We've got a lot of folks that love to have these business discussions about software product delivery. And if it's something that you think you'd be interested in doing more, talk to your AM and we'll get in contact. Okay, I want to thank you for staying, and I'll hang around after the fact, and if you have any questions, just come up and talk to me.